Mississauga. Spend some time in Mississauga. It's the greatest place we know.
Hello, thanks for joining us on Ask a Historian. I'm Eden Tesfaye and I'm with Heritage Mississauga. Please send your questions to history@heritagemississauga.org as we explore the fascinating stories of Mississauga together. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all heritage happenings here with Heritage Mississauga. In this program, we will be exploring memories, moments, and milestones from the past 50 years with past and present civic leaders and citizens for Mississauga's 50th anniversary. On this week's episode, we're excited to be joined by local historian, tour guide, and past president of the Mississauga South Historical Society, Richard Collins, as we explore personal perspectives of the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Thank you, Richard, for joining us today as we dive deep into some of your memories and your attachments to the City of Mississauga. So to start off, could you tell us a little bit about your connections to the City of Mississauga? Like, when did the city become home to you?
Oh, geez, I moved here. I was 35 when I moved here, so I was a late arrival. But I'd been living in Muskoka and just looking for work. Not really in heritage, oddly enough. I didn't think I'd ever get a job
Yeah.
working in museums. I was actually taking graphic design and journalism at
Oh,
Georgia College. So I came down looking for work as a writer or a graphic designer, and I figured Toronto was the place to be because that's where all the arts
mm,
commercial arts is going, but I knew I didn't want to live in Toronto. I thought that's too big and cluttered a city. So I thought, what about this Mississauga that's right next door? I had never visited here before. I didn't know anyone that lived here.
oh, wow.
But I just was intrigued partly by the name. And I thought, well, I want to be close to Toronto because that's where the work is, but I don't actually want to live there. So I actually came down as a commuter and then oddly enough found work here, working in a camera store originally, but then finally uh, found my calling when I got a job working for the City of Mississauga for the Bradley Museum and the Benares Historic House.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's really when I got involved in heritage. So yeah, I came down here as someone just looking for work.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow.
And
Yeah,
I thought, there's a
yeah,
lot out there.
but I heard, yeah, in Toronto, there's like, it's more like there's like a lot of art and like creative writing. There's like opportunities there and stuff. So
There
that's,
is. It's starting to move here because again,
yeah.
it's expanding out of Toronto. But at the time, yeah, and it still is for commercial arts the place to be.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's lots going on here with theater and music and graphic design. Like even
Yeah.
just thinking off the top of my head now, the Spent Pencil, which does our comic books for Heritage Mississauga, they're all local people that can make success. So yeah, things have changed in the past 30 odd years since I've been here.
Yeah. Wow, that's so nice. But yeah, like in connection to that like idea of like the past, is there any sort of like memories that you can think of that like truly stuck out to you here in Mississauga?
It's hard to say because I wasn't a kid here. I've always been an adult since I lived here. I do have good memories, but it's mostly just getting involved with heritage groups like Heritage Mississauga and just getting involved with preserving our heritage. That's most of my memories. Doing walking tours and meeting people and hearing about their stories of the past and discovering that in this big city with a lot of modern buildings, a lot of newcomers that people that don't have a connection to the past, it's actually easy to find people have an interest in the past and have a passion for saving what heritage we've got. And that's when I met you and other people at Heritage Mississauga over the years. Always a new turnaround of people at Heritage Mississauga. So I've met lots of people, and I hope they've gone on to do good things where they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, just mostly my memories are, just fairly recent because I've been an adult since I lived here. I don't have any childhood memories. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've enjoyed the time I'm here. I'm glad I'm here, and it's a city that where a lot of heritage needs preservation and protection because it's a fast growing city. So I like to be part of that crusade to
Yeah.
save what we got from the past.
Wow, that was nicely said. But yeah, yeah, like I know you like talked about some of like the changes that happen in the city, like when you mentioned how like now more like opportunities are here in Mississauga. So like is there any sort of change that really stuck out to you or something that was like most important to you that you've seen in the city?
Just a lot of growth. When I first moved here, I just lived across from Square One, 18 floors up, looking over Square One, and I could remember seeing, looking towards the north in the background, there were still barns. There was Ben Medill's barn and a couple other barns that you could see on
Really?
Eglinton further north. There were farms
Yeah.
not far from Square One. When I first moved here, of course, that's all mostly all been filled in. We still got that nice Britannia farm, which is protected, which is really great. Well, it should get put back to use. I think it's underutilized at the moment.
Mhm.
But yeah, most of what I remember is just growth. And again, losing some old buildings is, or just some old heritage sites as tall buildings, developments go up in their place. That's mostly what I think of the last 30 years in terms of change for me is it's the rapid growth. And sometimes it seems to go a little bit too fast. And sometimes our heritage gets lost
But
in the balance. But there's still some nice places where I go. I got good memories of the time I've been here, just walking through along the Credit River, some nice walking trails, nice cycling trails through
yeah.
here. So there's lots of good ways to relax and enjoy the city. And I always have fond memories of that and even continuing to do that.
Wow. Yeah, that's so nice. Like I know especially Square One, like it's so much more different now. There's like just like a lot of development there. So like
Yeah, when I was there, I was in one of the tallest buildings. There was two tall buildings that were 23 stories. There may have been uh, 5 or 6 of them, but now there's 20 or 30 of them. They say it's really grown there. I remember when I first moved here, I was
yeah.
glad to be on the south side because the transit, Mississauga Transit, I don't drive. So one reason why I chose the Square One area,
Mhm.
even though it was busy, is because I thought, well, when I find a job, I actually moved down without a job. I'm kind of restart my life over again when I moved to Mississauga. I could go in any direction from Square One to find work.
Yeah.
And yeah, the transit station used to be on the south side, and then it got picked up and moved to where it is now on the north side. So little changes like that, where I hadn't thought about that till someone a few days ago was mentioning Square One and said, "Yeah, I remember when the bus station used to be on the other side,
Yeah. Wow, that's
Wilco there."
yeah.
And now it's
It's actually
Walmart.
really cool because you can like look back at it and you're like, wow, like that was like it was so much more different like before, but now
Yeah,
everything's sort of
and the
changing.
changes are subtle. Yeah, they come over time. Like I say, if you look at Square One area, it's not all these buildings went up at once. They all come up one at a time, and you realize, yeah, like 6 buildings becomes 10, and 12, and 15, and 20. But over that 30-year period,
Mhm.
yeah, when you go by, it's quite a culture shock. But there's places, Port Credit. The growth was in the 60s and 70s before I moved here, and
Oh,
it stayed pretty much steady until only about 10 years ago. And
oh,
then the growth just started fairly recently. And
oh,
then you got places further to the north, like Meadowvale. I'm talking old historic Meadowvale, which is still trapped in time. You wouldn't even know you're in a big city. You're firmly in Mississauga when you're in the
oh,
Meadowvale Heritage Conservation District. But yeah, you can get trapped in time
yeah,
back there. There are some nice enclaves away from all this development, but people want to live in Mississauga. There's opportunities here, lots of jobs.
exactly, yeah.
So yeah, and there's reasons why people want to live there. I can understand that.
And it's like more of like especially like there's like a more of like a community, I guess. Like I hear a lot about how like Toronto is more like in your like especially like I notice a lot of young adults like move there to like study their careers and all of that. But then when they're kind of like settled down, most people come to Mississauga to kind of
Yeah,
like meet like actually form a community here. Like I don't know,
we
that's
get,
kind of what I heard a little bit.
oh yeah,
But
you get that in Port Credit for where I have been in Clarkson now, but same thing. Both these
yeah,
small villages, yeah, and my people know they're in Mississauga. They still relate a lot to the little village they
yeah.
live in. I know Matthew will even tell you about his past in Arundel.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and people live in Middleville and places like that.
Yeah.
And then uh, uh, Dave Cook, former counselor, and yeah, talks about his past growing up in Moulton. So
Oh,
yeah, people still, although they think of themselves living in Mississauga, a lot of them still have memories of the little villages that they lived in and how they've changed, and in some ways, how they're still around.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so adding on to this idea of like change, is there any like organizations or groups or clubs that you've been involved with and maybe you guys have made some sort of change in the city, but if not, it's okay, like anyone that you kind of want to give like a shout out to or anything?
Mostly Heritage, but Heritage Mississauga. It sounds like I'm pandering because I know it's what Heritage Mississauga is doing that. But this is I got involved with, geez, I don't know, 20 years ago or more now, 2005, 2006. I think I was asked to be in one of the haunted Halloweens.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of fun, and I've been doing them ever since then.
Wow.
They were lots of fun. But yeah, also just getting involved with groups like that. Heritage Advisory Committee. I'm uh, recently been a member with the Museums of Mississauga for 19 years. I was a tour guide at Bradley and Benares. Local ratepayers groups, still with the Town of Port Credit Association, because they're just very much involved in not stopping growth. They're quite content with growth as long as it's well planned.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, with a focus on, I tend to be part of that group to help focus on preserving heritage.
Mhm.
Also involved with the local ratepayers groups now. They've been the Port Credit, or not the ratepayers group, rather the local BIAs, Port Credit BIA, Clarkson BIA, Streetsville BIA have been promoting my walking tours. They're glad to have me come up and talk about the villages, and not just the downtown strip promoting the stores, but going off to the side streets and to the community that's around the business areas, because you realize it's one whole
Yeah.
kind of an organism that all works together as one. You need the downtown, but you need the community that's around it. Support the downtown, and heritage is important in these three villages. I find I'd like to start doing them in Malton too, because there is a little bit of history still there. But yeah, that's the groups I'm involved with, and with the Heritage Mississauga, I'm with the 1812 reenactment group, the
Oh,
Thompson Company, which is a bunch of guys just having fun dressing up in uniforms, but they're also aware of the fact that they are an education institution, that they're there to
yeah.
educate. They can have fun doing it, but that's their primary focus is educating people about our Mississauga's early history. And so that's lots of fun doing
Wow.
it.
That's so nice. You're part of like you're like really like engaged in the community. That must be like really nice because you can like look back at it and be like, wow, like I did this and that, and you
To
know.
be involved. I'd like to get involved with other groups that yeah, that want to get things done. Again, preserving the past, but also the ratepayers groups are also concerned about the future and making sure Mississauga goes in the right direction. So yeah, I like to get involved.
Oh
That
wow.
way I can complain if something's not right. Say, hey, at least I tried, as opposed to
Yeah.
being an armchair complainer. No, get out there and get involved with how the direction that the city's going in.
Yeah. Wow. That's true. Like you feel kind of good about yourself too that like you've like put a sort of like effort into like even like what you said about like looking into the sorry, into the future and
Yeah,
like planning for change and all of that. That's really nice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And like kind of like this idea with like the groups that you were a part of, is there any like specific people that maybe you've worked with or people who have inspired you or that like or people that have made like some sort of positive impact in the city and maybe you just want to talk about them and
Wow. I'm always cautious about this because I know I'm going to miss some people because there's been a lot of them. And if I mention 4 or 5 names and someone comes by, I don't think they'd be the type, say, hey, you forgot me, like they'd be jealous. But then I'd feel bad. Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned so and so because there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe I'm just thinking if I go by the groups, yeah, the Mississauga South Historical Society. And there's a lot of people that have lived in the community for a long time. Lauren Joyce, maybe I'll bring him up. He's no longer with us, but what a resource on Port Credit's history was. I used to love to hear him tell stories, great stories with a fun sense of humor. He'd talk about, say, one time I remember him telling a story about I boldly came up and told the group just from my research that the first running water came to Port Credit in 1923. That's when we got our first water mains and the pumping station. And Lauren raised his hand and said, oh, no, there was running water before 1923. He says, ever since I was a kid, we had a pump outside, and mom would tell me to run outside to pump some water. And so that was the so-called running water.
Oh.
That's the way he imparted his
Oh,
history. Alan Skio is someone that's very much the same way. He likes to incorporate history with humor. He got an odd sense of how to tell the past. He's made quilts, but not quilts that are knitted with wool. He made quilts out of old junk, hunks of wood, bits and pieces of metal, scrap shots. But he blends all these odd pieces together into what he calls quilts, and they're like memories of the past, just old bits of old farming implements. Even I remember something had a bit of an odd metal shape on it. Turns out it was part of the key from a saxophone. He had just found it and stuck it into a quilt. So yeah, again, a kind of an odd way of talking about the past. Trying to think who else from MSHS. So many of them. Dave Cook, I think I mentioned him already. He's really good for that. Charlie Hare, a lot of hairs in the Port Credit area. Uh, those are the ones that come to mind early from the local historical society. Friends that I've known from Heritage Mississauga as well. Matthew, of course, is a passionate resource, not only because he's well educated on the history, but he's lived in Mississauga all his life. So it's not just history for him, it's his personal stories as well. A lot of people that have influenced me and made me feel good about telling stories of the past. Even my old high school teacher back in Gravenhurst,
Yeah.
Mr. He was one who was not one for reading out of textbooks. He was one for telling great stories, and made me realize that history is not memorizing dates and names. It's more about the story behind the names and the dates and the people.
Wow.
So I have a lot of influences, most of it here, but a lot of it even as a high school student.
Yeah, that's nice. Like the fact that you even like remember like a teacher from high school who might have like inspired you. That's so nice because it's like there are these like people that you don't even think that like they like for example a teacher like you go to their classes and stuff, but then in the future you look back at the things they taught you and you're like, wow, this actually like inspired me to do what I love,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that,
Mr. Ruddle was very much like that. I just remember, I know in grade 10, way back when I was in high school,
Wow.
grammar school, uh, gr- uh, grade 10 history was one of the few courses that you had to take. You had to take 4 Englishes and I think a couple maths, and one was grade 10 history. So we knew we had a lot of students that were just there because they had to take this course. They weren't there because they wanted to learn about history. It wasn't something to them, but they knew they had to have this course
Yeah,
to get.
we had that too. Yeah.
And so he made it fun. He realized, hey, these kids don't really want to be here. They have to be here because the provincial mandate for credits requires that they have grade 10 history, because that's when you learn about Canadian history. And so he was just the kind of guy that said, I'm going to make this fun for everyone so that, they'll remember how to do the test, because they'll remember the stories I told. And yeah, so that's been carried through in life, where I realized you got to tell stories. When I do walking tours, rather than point at buildings and names and dates and who lived here and this and that, it's more like
You make it
tell a
fun.
story and then get people in the crowd to tell me their stories. That's one really great thing I really enjoy about doing walking tours, is that I get people that want to tell their stories. And sometimes I find I'm getting the tips at the end of the tour, but it's the people in the tour group that did most of the work for me, because they told me their stories and their memories, and we get on people's opinions on what they think of the new architecture that's going up and whether we like it or don't like it and things like that. So you get people involved and they realize that history is not about listening to some professor talk and make points, that you get involved. And when you tell your stories, that's when you're engaging in real heritage.
Wow. Yeah, that's nice that like even though you kind of share like some facts and stories to them, but you're also kind of learning from them as well. Like it's like
Yeah.
that's like you get to bond in that way. That's so nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then all that stuff goes into the next tours. The tours get better
Yeah.
and better. They keep telling people their stories. And
Yeah,
tours.
exactly. Wow, that's nice. But yeah, now looking into the future, like let's say maybe the next 50 years of our city, do you have any like wishes or hopes for the future of Mississauga? Anything maybe you want to change or like
Yeah, it's hard to tell because you can never predict the future. People try to do that, and but Mississauga is going to have to change from within, because it can't grow anymore. I mean, it can't expand outward. It's pretty much filled up its boundaries. It's already overflowing into Oakville and uh, and Brampton, and Toronto's already overflowed into Mississauga. So uh, I think we're going to change. It's going to, again, from a heritage point of view, it's going to have to focus on developing within the urban centers that we already have, like Port Credit, Clarkson, Lakeview, Cooksville, Moulton, Streetsville, Meadowvale, the individual old historic cores, and try and focus on going to our past, when Mississauga was 8 or 10 little individual communities that kind of rippled out, almost like throwing like 10 or 12 stones into the water. Instead of having one ripple, you have all these ripples that just all kind of ripple out, and then they all meet and form one bigger ripple. That's kind of the way Mississauga grew, little individual villages that just kept expanding until they all bumped into each other and became this one huge city. But we did have some urban planning problems along the way. We have a lot of industry way up towards the airport. And then in the opposite direction, the south and west, you have huge swaths of residential area with no industries. So everyone has to go from here to there, and then from there to there. You've got to move to get to where you want to go. And I think if in the future we focus on the little villages and try and get living spaces, but also really focus on the downtowns again and get more employment into the downtowns, people can just move within their community as they need to, and then just go back and forth between communities, at their leisure when
Yeah.
they just want to go someplace different, and then make the individual community self-reliant, still be Mississauga, but unlike this big city where we've just kind of pushed everything into big masses of industrial or residential, we try and get to smaller communities so we can still get growth. You just get growth in more localized regions. That'll help our traffic.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, wow.
Yeah, even Mayor McCallion admitted once, I think it was in an interview with Rick Mercer, I don't know if she opened up to him because he wasn't a newsman, he was a comedian. And they
Oh,
were skating in front of the Civic Center one day, and they actually got her to kind of admit that she'd made one big mistake.
wait,
And
really?
I'm quoting Hazel, and she identified transit as something that just it didn't work well. We didn't plan well for transit, which is why it's difficult getting around Mississauga. And I
Yeah,
don't have a car,
yeah.
so
So you have
I
to, yeah.
real pain to get around
Oh
all
my
the time.
God.
But we
That's,
can improve that by going again into smaller urban areas and make it so much easier
mhm.
just to get around your own community and do most of what you can within Port Credit or Streetsville or Malton as need be. And Lakeview is a good place to start that now, where the uh, old thermal generating station is gone now. You've got all that open space. This is the perfect time to replan Lakeview right and get its own downtown core,
Yeah,
get some living areas, but also get some employment land so that people can actually live and work and shop and
exactly.
get everything they need in that neighborhood.
Mhm. Well, I completely agree. Yeah. Like it should seriously, yeah. Like it would give people more opportunities, and especially now, like, everything's getting everything's getting more expensive. And so like people need these jobs to be able to like be financially stable and like take care of like families, all of that.
Yeah,
So
that's what a lot of stuff recently, because I don't, and people will be watching this years later from now once it's on YouTube, but just in context, we just finished with a mayor's election, the first real mayor's election we've had
yeah.
since 1974 when we first
Exactly.
became a city. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's becoming the topic of, how do we find places for people low income and homeless and all that. And oftentimes the real solution is just find people jobs, give
Hmm.
them jobs. We move too much of our employment out of the city. We need to move it back in and give people opportunities to work where they live.
Yeah.
And that'll solve a lot of the social problems. Yeah, high rent's one problem, but low income times high rent is the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
We need, but I think part of the problem is it's lucrative to put up condo developments because it's relatively inexpensive and it's a quick return on investment for developers. And so we get too much housing and not enough focus on office space and just putting people just jobs. And so what jobs we have are way, way up by the airport. And it's a long time to get to them in a
Yeah.
car or a bus.
Yeah. Wow, that's so true. Like, yeah.
And we can preserve, one thing we are doing well is while we're doing all this growth, we are preserving the Credit River. It really is, it is our backbone
Yeah.
physically, historically. So yeah, let's give the Credit River
Yeah.
some recognition here because it is a jewel. In the Rattrain Marsh, we've got that. Our shoreline, a lot of our shoreline is the waterfront trail goes through it. Lots of trails. So yeah, protecting things like that at the same time, our natural heritage is also important to protect.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. But honestly, like, thank you so much for all these like thoughtful responses, and thank you for just like sharing your story and your experiences here. But
Oh, thanks. I
yeah,
like to talk.
yeah, that was the last question. So yeah, just to wrap things up, again, we just like want to say like thank you so much for your patience and everything. And it was so nice hearing your story today. So thank
Oh,
you.
thanks.
Yeah,
Enjoyed that. So,
thank you. Bye.
thank you.
Thank you for spending some time with us here on Ask a Historian. And thank you also for sharing moments and milestones with us for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Like, subscribe, and follow us, and we will see you on future episodes of Ask a Historian with Heritage Mississauga.